Hello everyone, my name is Derek and this is the Bourbon Table, and today we're going to go through a shelf tour of a liquor store in North Brunswick, New Jersey called Total Wine. I'm sure you've heard of it, everybody has, and we're just going to see what they have and what they're charging for it. This video is a little bit late. I was in there about a month and a half ago, but due to my vacation, it's a little bit behind. So don't go in there expecting this to be the way it looks today, but this will be about how it looks. So let's just jump right in. This is, by the way, these two are a little bit of a hint of what I got there. We're going to jump right into the first section. As you know, we go through every price on every shelf in a very quick and exacting manner that allows us to see what they're selling and what they're selling it for. That's what I do in my bourbon hunting. I do shelf tours on the bourbon hunt, so you get to see everything at your own pace. And by the way, do me a favor. If you like my content, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave some comments. Much appreciated. All right, now let's jump into the first shelf here at Total Wine. The first thing I want to talk about is the Total Wine brands. And the Total Wine brands are oftentimes, they seem like they're a good value. They're not overpriced in the category, but they're overpriced in the quality, despite some of their product being listed. And you can see here on this particular shelf, there's a lot of stickers there that say gold and double gold. I would say before you buy a Total Wine, check out the reviews before you purchase it. That said, we can see some really interesting stuff here on the bottom two shelves. Right down here, I'm a big fan of Barrel Bourbon Spirits, and they have got 4 options there. There was another one that we'll see later on that I picked up, and these is the ones that they have now. You can see right next to that is a 13 Colony cask strength, and there's one missing. That's because it's in my hand. I picked that one up. I'm a big fan of 13 Colony, and the cask strength is one I didn't have. It's $96 there. I couldn't tell you if that's a great price or not, but it was for me because that's the first place I've ever seen it. And then looking across, you've got the 2XO at $49. The French Oak is one that I have that I really enjoy. Looking down, you've got the Baker's 7, Asbury Park, which I haven't tried. The Baker's 7 is very good. And then you have a bunch of 1792s there. The small batch $17.92 is a great price at $26.89 for the 750. And then right next to that, you have the 1 liter at $29.99. That's a great price. And here in PA, the small batch is $32 and change. So that's a great price. Single barrel at $47.99, a great price. Bottle and bond, $45. Full proof, $55. Great price. And then right next to it, unfortunately, and that's an allocated item, as you can see there, the sweet wheat for $54. That's a great price if you can find it. I've seen that upwards of $75 in many places. That would have been a great price that I would have picked up had it been there. The next shelf will go top to bottom here. That Bacta 2011, $130, that's about the going rate. Those Bird Gangs, they're about the going rate. Ben Holidays, they're about the going rate. There's the Bardstown Original Series, looks like it is the Foundation at $40. That's kind of a standard price. The Bottle and Bond at $45 is a standard price. Next to that, the Angel's Envy Triple Oak, that's a great price. That sells for upwards of $75 in some places. Let's see, what's out of stock there? That's an Angel's Envy cask strength at $60. That's a great price. Then you see all these Bib and Tuckers. The one I'd like to point out here is the Gold Roast Bourbon for $49. Great price. That's a bourbon I haven't tried yet that I'm interested in because it's infused with coffee beans. How about that? And then here's another one that I haven't seen, haven't tried, haven't heard about, so I didn't pick up. Bib and Tucker 10-year bourbon. Looks like it was rated 90 by Wine Enthusiasts for $89. That's about right if you use the $10 per year method to validate the price. This middle shelf is a bunch of Total Wine, although I will say I've had the Collins Orange Twists. They're good, and $10 is really good price. This Bull and Bear, I don't know anything about. That's probably a fine wine brand. And then at the bottom, you got some really good prices. Benchmark, 21, 28, 30, and $17.50, great prices. And then there's the barrel I was talking about, the cigar blend, which is highly reviewed at 90, we'll call it $100. And that price is pretty good. It's not great, but it's not horrible. And in fact, as you can see, that was the last one and I grabbed it. Basil Hayden, Usual Suspects. The 10-year at $86 is high. I've seen it as low as $75. There you got Booker's on the top, $120, $115. That's high. That normally sells for around $100, although I know prices have gone up. But really, it's probably should be priced more at $75, $80 based on the juice that's in there. Anything over $100, in my opinion, is too high. There's some Blue Run. $86 for that is about normal. And some Blue Notes. They look, all three of those look fairly priced. And that third shelf looks like a Total Wine Brands. And then we've got Bullet. Those are some good looking prices, especially the one over here, the barrel strength for $42. That's a tasty bottle, and that is a great price. Bottle and Bond for $49, we'll call it $50, another decent price. Next one over, we'll go right to the top. Calumet 15 is a good bottle. I wouldn't get the other Calumets. Calumet 15 at $130. That's a pretty decent price. I'd like to see it a little bit lower to make it a great value, but that's a good price. And then right below that, you have Total Wine's pick of $17.92 full proof at $56. That's a good price for that. This next shelf is all Total Wine branded stuff. The next shelf as well. The bottom shelf is not. Clyde Mays is a good price. John J. Bowman at $65 all the way there in the bottom corner. That's a great price, and that's a great bottle. That's Buffalo Trace product in there. Looking at the top shelf, that Heaven Hill for $44, outstanding price. The next two shelves are Total Wine branded stuff, and then below that you have LeGrand. Those are kind of normal prices. Then you have Elijah Craig stuff. And I would say the most interesting, so that's regular stuff. And then over here you have a Toasted Barrel for $40. It's a good price. And then you have what looks like the C925 Barrel Proof for $75. That's about the going rate. And then down on the bottom, a bunch of Evan Williams stuff, which all looks to be at really good prices. Even the single barrel all the way in the corner here for $35. Evan Williams Bottle and Bond at $22. That's a great bottle at a really good price. I've seen it cheaper, but not much cheaper. Next section, we'll start at the top here. This guy right there for $75, their small batch, that got rated best in the world. And then next to that, you have different single barrels. I don't know the price quality there, but I can tell you that the small batch at $75 is about the going rate. Four Roses across the top, and the Four Roses single barrels for $45 are great prices for the OBSK, the OESK, and the OBSF. And even that Four Roses small batch select on the right for $56 is a good price. Now going on to this shelf, those are all Total Wine brands, except for the Garrison Brothers. And here, the Garrison Brothers Honeydew at $81 is a good price. Garrison Brothers small batch I'm not familiar with, so I can't tell you if that's a great price or not. The next shelf, some of the Usual Suspects, High West in there. Not familiar with Harlem Standard. Heaven's Door, not familiar with those particular bottles, but they look like good prices. And then at the bottom, Old Ezra 7-year at $68. That's about right. Early Times Bottle and Bond, the round bottle, $27. Grab them while you can. That's a good price. The square bottle at $22. It is getting panned across the internet, and I am just not willing to try it. Then you've got some Green River. Those are good prices. The Full Proof at $47 and the Wheated at $33. Very good prices. Hard Truth Sweet Mash. This is an excellent bottle at $49 and is an excellent price. And then we'll come across here. Before we get into it, I see that Eventry Ginger Beer. That is a great product to make a Kentucky Mule out of. If you do make a Kentucky Mule, whether it's Fever Tree or not, I definitely recommend using mint leaves. That makes the difference. Those top two shelves there are fine wine brands, and then we get into the Jack Daniels. Those are, those are okay prices. This one for 62 is a 1 liter, and Total Wine sometimes has 1 liters in different things. You'll have to do the math to see if it's worth getting a 1 liter versus a 750. Usually it's the same cost per ounce. And then you've got the Jack Daniel's single barrel heritage barrel at $67. That's high. I'd like to see that somewhere under 65. Then going across the single barrel. And then you've got the Jack Daniel's single barrel proof for $83. That's high. The Jack Daniel's bottle and bond for $32. That's a good price. And then one next to that is the 1 liter for $46. Not sure if that's a good price or not. You'll have to do the math. Some more Jack Daniel's usual suspects. Next shelf, we're going to go right to the top. I'm not a big fan of Jefferson's products, but you can see it across the top. The one I do like is all the way there to the right. That's the cast strength for $77. That's about what it's going for. The rest of the stuff looks like decent prices, except that Tropics for $110. That looks high. Next shelf is Total Wine, those 2 shelves. Then we're going to look at the bottom shelves. Horse Soldier. I've not tried any of that stuff, so I couldn't tell you. I'm not watching the prices on that. The Jim Beam next to it, I can tell you that Winter Reserve for $41, that's high. When it first came out, it was much lower than that. I want to say in the $20 range. I don't know if they're going to do it again, so they probably just brought it out at a higher price. And the Jim Beam single barrel didn't get great reviews, and at $49, I would hold off on it. And then your usual Jim Beam at the bottom. The 7-year, which is well reviewed, $32. It's sneaking up, but then again, so is everything else. The next shelf, the regular 13 Colony Bourbon for $49, next to the Maple Wood for $65. Those are decent prices. The Maple Wood is not something that I would go out and collect, and $65. It's not something that I'd be willing to pay for that. The reviews were okay on that. The Knob Creek 12 at $70, that's a little high. I've seen that actually under $60. The next 2 shelves we're going to skip, although I will say those Luxardo Maraschino cherries at $22, that's about the going rate. Then you've got some Larcenies down there, and the Larceny barrel proof right there for $70. That's a little on the high side. That probably should be $65, but not terrible. The Maker's Mark 101 at $40, that's a good price. The Maker's Mark right there called the Brave for $51, which they put out for America's 250th anniversary. I got for less than $50. I can't remember if it was $46, $47, but I got it for less than that, also in New Jersey. Next shelf, if we look at the top, some usual suspects up there. That Old Elk cigar cut for $120, that's about the right price. Again, here's Total Wine's brands. And there at the bottom, New Riff Single Barrel for $56, that's a good price. Michter's Small Batch Bourbon for $39, that's about the going rate. And Maker's Mark for $29, that's the red, white, and blue version. It's the regular juice, just dipped in multiple waxes. That's a little bit higher, but I assume they're charging more for the wax. If we're moving along pretty quick here, Old Grandad across the top, those are good prices, although I've seen the 114 for less. Again, we're going to skip the next 2 shelves of Total Wine product. And then we've got the Old Forester Single Barrel Total Wine Pick for $73. That's a great price for that. That's normally $85 to $100. In fact, look at here. They've got another bottle down here for $83, probably a different pick, which is interesting. And then your regular Old Forester products across the bottom, which all look to be decent prices. Here you've got your rabbit hole across the top. The Derringer in red there for $93. That's high. I'd like to see that in the low 80s, although again, prices are going up. And then you've got the Peerless. Peerless, in my opinion, has the widest spread of pricing that I've ever seen on any bottle. Some places it's, for example, their regular small batch bourbon. I've seen it as low as $70 and 83 is high. This double oaked, I've seen over 100. So the spread is pretty dramatic depending on where you get it. On the second shelf, we've got some redemption in there. There's the 9-year for $115. I haven't tried it, but typically it's $10 per year, so $115 does seem high. And then you've got the Remus Gatsby for $145 right there. And then moving down, Those are Total Wine brands. Then you got a whole shelf of Penelope, which is owned by MGP. And as I look at the pricing looks really good on Penelope. The regular bourbon for 28, the wheated for 33. I normally see well over $40, $44, $45. The Architect is usually around the $60 to $65 mark. The barrel strength looks right. The Rosé cask for $60 looks right. I'm not a big fan of that bottle. And then the Toasted for $54 looks really good. The Penelope bottle, that is the F Cancer cask strength. To the right of that is the regular F Cancer at $80. That's sold out. But the cask strength is $95. That's the only place I've seen the cask strength, so I couldn't tell you if that's good. The regular at $80, that's about right. The Redwood Empire prices look good. Not super great, but better than average. Again, we'll start at the top. You've got some Russells up there. Russell's 10-year for $49. That's high. I like to see that at $45 or less. The Reserve at $71. Single barrels. That's okay. It could be less. It could be around the $60 to $65. The Rebel 10 years at $115. That's too high. That should be $100 or less. Actually, $115 is the highest I've seen it. The Rebel 100 at $19, or we'll call it $20. That's a good price. The Still Austin, they have an exclusive deal. Total Wine does with Still Austin, so you're going to get some good prices there. That's some good juice. Probably, some will say, the best bourbon that comes out of Texas. Then you've got more. And you've got that whiskey sampler pack in the middle for $80. That's, if you haven't had Still Austin and you want to get a sample of it, that's a good box to get. That's a good price for it. At the bottom, you have your regular Wild Turkey stuff. Although this Wild Turkey, the Kentucky Spirit at $60 is a good price. And the Rowan's Creek, which is a Willet product at $46, that's a good price as well. That Yellowstone at $95, limited edition $25, that's a good price. Then you've got the Willet Pot Still bottle. Those are good prices for that. Whistle Pig, 6-year at $40. That's a good price. The tin cups look like good prices. We're going to skip the next shelf or two. And then we're going to go into the Woodford product. The Double Oak at $55 is a great price for that. Then to the left of that for $75, that's the 1 liter. And then to the right of that for $120, that's the single barrel. The problem with the single barrel is that it comes out about 96 proof and the regular Double Oak is 90 proof. So you're paying more than double for 6 proof points. Yeah, I can't see it. Sorry. Double Oaked for $200. That's high and not worth it. Should be closer to $125 maybe. The 119.5 at $125. That's a good price. Baby Jane at $52. That's a good price, although I have seen it cheaper. And the 10-year at $65. That's okay. Widow Jane Decadence at $95. It's a good, not great price. And next to that, Lucky 13-year at $115. That's a good price. And then across the bottom, those prices are pretty standard. Now we're getting into the rye bourbon at Total Wine. And as we look across the top, the Hudson Whiskey New York, I would stay away from. That stuff just has not gotten good reviews. So I would stay away from it unless you've had it and you like it. The Heaven Hill Grain to Glass for $100 right there. That's a good price, but probably overpriced for the quality. Next to that is another Bird Gang. Next to that is a Bacta Straight Rye with Calvados and Armagnac for $68. That's about the going rate for that. We've got some more Basil Hayden, which is not my bag. A Seagrass for $80. That's okay. And the Angel Envy prices for small batch, actually, and for the Caribbean cast is good prices. And then the Old Overholt for $41, that's about normal. We're going to skip the next two shelves as usual. And we're going to get to the bottom. Dad's Hat, those are good prices. And that is a favorite of mine locally here in Pennsylvania. Then you've got Elijah Craig Toasted Rye, 94 proof for $48. That is a really good price for that. Then the usual Elijah Craig's. And then you've got Heaven's Door, not sure about that, Refuge bottle. And then you've got Hemingway at $72. That's a rye. That's a pretty good rye, actually. I have one of those. It's a store pick, and I really enjoy it. Hard Truth Sweet Mash Rye. for $76. That's an okay price. The Hard Truth Sweet Mash High Road Rye, have no idea. Don't know anything about that one. If you know about that one and if that's a good price, please let me know in the comments. And then the Bullet 95 Rye for $29, that's a good price. Those are great for mixers. Then you got the 10-year for $40. That's a great value, 10-year for $40. Again, if you're thinking about $10 per year, that's less than half of that. That's $4 per year. Some more ryes. The Knob Creek 7 years, those are about right. The Jefferson Ryes, I'm not too familiar with the pricing on that. High West Boo Rye for $105 is a great price. That came out at $125. It's not worth $125. It's probably not worth $105. That's probably a $75 bottle. But this is the best price I've seen at $105. And those other High Wests are good prices. We're going to skip the next shelf and half of the next shelf, but I do want to highlight this Old Forester single barrel. They have limit 1 at $110. That's high. I'd like to see that no more than $100, preferably even less than that. Although that's harder to come by than the single barrel bourbon is this rye. We got some Redwood Empires here, Van Heusen Straight Rye. Those look like pretty good prices. The new Riffs look like good prices. The Jack Daniels, now they don't have a price for the single barrel, unfortunately, so I couldn't tell you. But the bourbon for $34 and the 1 liter for $50, those are good prices. And then here's your usual suspects across the bottom. I would say the Pikesville at $62, that's high. That, unfortunately, that originally came out in the $40 range. It is very good rye whiskey, but $62 is high. You can get better rye for that price. And then the Peerless Double Oak Rye, and here it is again, $130. I've seen it much higher. I've seen it a little bit lower. That's an okay price, but it's a great bottle. Here's the Woodford Barrel Strength Rye, 125.1 proof, $130. That's an okay price. I haven't had that, so I couldn't tell you if it's worth it. Sazerac 100 proof for $33. That's the going rate. The regular Sazerac for $29, the going rate. And the Sazerac handle there for $63. That's way high. In PA, fine wine and good spirits right now, it's selling for under $50. It's a 10-year for $80. That's a good price. The Sagamore Rye at $37. That's about right. The Sagamore Double Oak, which is a great bottle, for $54. That's about right. The Russell's Rye 6-year for $51. Maybe it's a little high. Rittenhouse for $30 is good, and then the Rebel Rye, again for $20, is a good price. And that's a Michter's US 1 rye whiskey for $41. That's about the going rate for that. We're going to skip these 2 shelves of Total Wine brands, actually 3 shelves. I'm going to go right to the bottom here. Tin Cup Rye, that looks right. Uncle Nearest Rye, that looks a little bit high. The Rare Breed Rye, $5 high on that. I've seen it for $65. And the rest look okay, except for this Willet at $68. I'd like to see this in the 50s. I have seen it in the 50s. I purchased it under $60 myself a couple times. The Woodford 8-year at $140, that's probably high. I got the 9-year for less than that. So that's a little bit on the high side, but it's hard to find. Sometimes you pay for a bottle that you really, really want, whatever the price is, if it's hard to find. This finishes off the bourbons and the ryes, and you got your rare characters across the top for $100. That's about the going rate. I've seen them low 90s, I should say, and I've seen them over $100. The Whistle Pigs, those prices look pretty good. Not familiar with the Declaration Wheated Whiskey pricing. The Liquid Death Wheated Whiskey, that's a fair price, I guess, but that hasn't gotten good reviews. There's some more Still Austin stuff at good prices. Redemption Rye, that looks like a good price. And then we're going to get to this shelf here with some High West. Not familiar with Jacob's Pardon. It's interesting that they put a $215 bottle there and not in their case. I am going to show you the case here momentarily. And again, before we go any further, if you enjoy my content, seeing every bottle on every shelf, please like and subscribe. We're at 535 subscribers right now, and I'm shooting for 1,000. I'd like to get to 1,000 before the end of the year. The bottom is not a whole lot that I'm familiar with, except for the Bullet single malt. That's a going price for the single malt. Haven't tried it, so I couldn't tell you if it's good. I haven't tried a whole lot of single malt. That hasn't caught my eye just yet. Then we're going to go here, and we're going to see some really interesting bottles. There's some more Michter's across the top at some good prices. Uncle Nearest Rye at $25. If you're seeing any Uncle Nearest that you like, I'd scoop it up. They're in bankruptcy, and they have a court date, possibly, to find out what they're going to be able to do there. But if there's a Uncle Nearest that you like, I'd scoop it up. Knob Creek Boo Rye for $45. That's a pretty good price, probably about right. Barrel Dovetail for $80. That's about normal. We're going to skip the next shelf, and then down here we're going to see some single malts, cask strength bourbon rye from Redwood Empire, $65. Foggy Burl for $110. So those prices look about normal. We're in the kind of the bourbon / rye single malt under the category of just really American whiskeys. Down here, the Stranahan's, that's probably our best single malt made in America, I think. Don't quote me on that. But those are really good prices there. Wow, that's single malt in Caribbean cask for $94 from $24. That's probably really tasty. All right, then you've got some Uncle Nearest stuff across here. Uncle Nearest single barrel for $80. That's high. Here's another single barrel. That's 118 proof for $100. This is 120 proof for $80. Interesting. I wonder what the difference is in flavor. Then you've got the Uncle Nearest Cognac cask, which this is only the second place I've ever seen it. I picked it up in another location for less. $165 here. At the bottom, here is some American whiskeys from Woodford, Texas, TX. Not familiar with them. Here's Travelers. Not getting a whole lot of love, and it is made out of Buffalo Trace Sazerac's facilities, just not getting a whole lot of love. I think the pricing will have to come down on that. And it actually has come down quite a bit now that I'm looking at it. The original Travelers is now down to $29. Boy, that's really down. And then the full proof is at $39. So these are great prices for Travelers here. And before we get to what's in the case, these are the two bottles that I picked up at Total Wine in North Brunswick, New Jersey. Two bangers that I'm totally thrilled with. And now we got the case. Unfortunately, the case is not super interesting, but there are some interesting things in here. If you're a fan of Whistle Pig, there you've got the Boss Hog and the Piggy Bank, but I'm not a fan, so I'm not really familiar with those prices. There's the Calumet 15 we saw earlier at, I think it was $129. There's the 16 at $160. That's an okay price. Those two are the only two Calumets, in my opinion, that are really something nice that I would pick up. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I have the 16 on my shelf. And then we can go down here. Peerless. I'm a big Peerless fan. And there is the High Rye Bourbon, which I have. $150 seems very high to me. Again, here is the Old Elk Cigar Cut for $120. That's about the going rate on that one. The Red Spot Irish Whiskey, age 15 years, $170. I'm not sure. I don't have it. I'm not big into the Irish whiskey, but the Red Spot, all the spots really get good reviews. Next to that, you can barely see it. That's the Bacta 2011 Armagnac cask bourbon for $130. That's about the going rate for that. We'll move up. That's the Sweet Oak, actually, for $190. Probably at or close to the going rate, but based on its reviews, not worth it. We go across here, the Elijah Craig 18 at $215. That's highly rated. You can see there 98 by Wine Enthusiast. Here in PA, that's selling for $212. All right, there's Two Barrel Expressions. The gray label there at $145, that's a good price. And the Barrel Whiskey Decade Blend, which is a 20-year blend at 112.7 proof at $260. I'm not familiar with the pricing on the decades. I can tell you the gray labels came down since Barrel Spirits ran into some financial challenges to try and move product a little bit quicker. I think that $145 is probably good price. Garrison Brothers, I'm not familiar with that bottle. And the other Garrison I can't see from this angle. These Chestnut Farms, that is the Total Wine brand. And while it is a double gold, at $150, you're going to get better bourbon elsewhere. And here's the Rabbit Hole Founders Mizunara 15-year for $1,800. And then lastly, we've got some Angel's Envy across the top. Angel's Envy Cellar Tequila Cask at 250, cask strength at 260, and 10-year cask strength at 270. I'm not familiar with these bottles. They seem priced high, so I would want to taste it before I paid that price for any of that stuff. There's so much bourbon out there and even rye out there that I would love to get for much less money. And that's Total Wine in North Brunswick, New Jersey. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please thumbs up, subscribe, leave comments. Shooting for 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you like bourbon hunting where you can see everything on the shelf and the prices, please give me a like. Please subscribe. Leave comments below. Let me know, have you ever been to this Total Wine? If you have, what do you think? And if you've seen anything on the shelf that I didn't know about, please let me know what you know about it. Again, my name is Derek. This is the Bourbon Table, and I'll see you next time.
Wow.